Valérie Plante will be speaking with you, and then the President of the Executive Committee, Mr. Benoit Dorais, is going to speak in French, and then they will go back and both speak in English. So without any further ado, thank you very much, Mr. Dorais. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. Thank you to our team of interpreters today who are always here with us. So this afternoon, we're going to talk to you to go over a first overview of the Montreal finances and talk about certain efforts that the city wishes to bring forward to get out of this crisis. And we're being realistic because, of course, the public finances of our administration will be very shaken by the world economic slowdown because of the pandemic. And we can see it. All the great U.S. and Canadian cities have to review their priorities, and Montreal is no exception. Since the beginning of this unprecedented crisis, our administration follows the situation very closely by having financial overviews that go from very optimistic to very pessimistic. We said last week we've been working on a recovery plan that is going to have to do with different steps and which will base itself on three important parts in order to adequately answer to the situation. Today, we show responsibility from a financial point of view to avoid too high a deficit. So what we are announcing today is the first step that we have to bring forward in order to have a healthy recovery of our economy. Montreal, I have to say, is well positioned to be able to go through the difficulties. Our rigorous management of the past few years has allowed us to have substantial surpluses and to be solid, to be able to get through a storm. Thanks to this rigorous management, the City of Montreal recorded a surplus of $251 million last year. And year after year, we have had surpluses in order to be more ready for moments exactly such as this one. It is what every responsible administration does, and we are very proud of the choices that have been taken in the past by our team. However, the impacts on income expense of the city are going to be major, even in the most optimistic of scenarios. And I will let my colleague, of course, the President of the Executive Committee, give you this plan in detail. But keep in mind that this is only a beginning, the first step in the right direction to make sure that the finances of the City of Montreal remain healthy despite the crisis. However, it's not going to be enough. Cities have reduced leeway compared to other levels of government since we depend very strongly on housing taxes. And this solution cannot be only on the shoulders of Montreal taxpayers. And so we will have to have help from Quebec and Ottawa to help us get through this and allow Montreal, which is the very engine of Quebec, to be able to stand up again quickly after the crisis without depending only on property taxes. And the employees of the city and unions will also have to collaborate with us to find equitable measures of savings, equitable towards all of Montrealers. I know that the effort that we're asking for today is important, but it's all together that we're able to get through this crisis. All Montrealers are doing their share and going through difficult times at this time, and I want to reassure them. The recovery plan that we're announcing today is to minimize the impacts on the services to citizens. However, we have to review the projects that we will start over the next few weeks. A pause is necessary to be able to start up with this new reality in mind. The recovery that will follow this operation will allow the City of Montreal to better position itself with the priorities that will come out of this crisis. I'm talking about social justice to protect those most vulnerable and the ecological transition. The other crisis that is taking more and more room, that of climate change. The plan that will be shown to you is a first step of budgets. Although it is difficult, it is absolutely necessary. And I will now give the mic to Mr. Dorais. Thank you, Madam Mayor. The situation in which we find ourselves, it's not an easy one, but I think that we can esteem ourselves lucky if we compare ourselves to other great Canadian cities. But it is important to mention, Madam Mayor, that the expenses that are linked directly to the crisis. For example, the purchase of sanitary material, the overtime as well, that for the staff in first line is added to losses of income that are very important. The slowdown that is predictable of real estate transaction is going to slow down as well. The taxes like the bienvenue taxes, as well as the parking fees and all those other incomes. So right now we are thinking that we're going to have a lot less income in the city of Montreal. And of course, no one has a crystal ball. But it is with the things that we already know. And as you said, Madam Mayor, we have two scenarios. One is optimistic, one is pessimistic. We are thinking right now that the impacts, whether it be in loss of income or the extra expenses, so an impact of $104.8 million, and it could go up to $294.1 million. We have to keep in mind, as you were saying earlier on, that the crisis is still in evolution, and these are all hypotheses. This is a first step, a first evaluation. It's pretty complete, but it still is only the first. And this will change over the months to come when the deconfinement is set up. So deconfinement that we know will be progressive according to what the government authorities were saying, and then we will have a better idea of the exact impact of the crisis on the different positions in terms of income and in terms of expenses are concerned. And to that must be added another variable, which is important, a lack that is very significant in terms of collective transportation, public transportation. That is a bill that will be very important, very imposing on the sort of the Regional Authority of Metropolitan Transportation, or the RTM. And for us, that impact, that lack in the RTM is going to be $154 million in an optimistic scenario. In a pessimistic scenarios, it could go up to $244 million for us. All the great cities of the metropolitan area are going to have to deal with this, and we expect that our government partners will participate actively to be able to fix the situation for the good of the entire metropolitan area. Since the beginning, Madam Mayor, you and I have both been clear. There is no question of handing that bill to Montrealers, who, we repeated, are already being very hard hit by the crisis. Our commitment of not taxing the citizens beyond inflation will be kept, and there is no question of getting more out of taxpayers' pockets to be able to fill that gap for the present year or to decrease the services that are offered to them. That's important. And that is why today we are announcing a new budget to limit our expenses and to try to save. We want to save $123.4 million this year to be able to face the crisis. And this is the first part. So how is that? What is that going to mean? Well, it's going to be in the central services that are going to have to reduce their expenses by $85 million. The boroughs are also going to have to lower 3.1% of the expenses they had budgeted. That will be a total of $28.7 million. How are we going to be doing that? Well, in the next few weeks, each service, each borough is going to make up its own complete plan to explain how they are going to get to these savings. Until then, because we have to give them the time to do that, but at the same time we have to mark a break, so we will be imposing many control measures to slow down expenses. For example, no more hirees, a freeze on professional fees, a general freeze on purchases, a freeze as well of $9 million of the contingency expenses that are planned for by the administration. And I think that in acting as of now, quickly, diligently, we are making sure that we will be limiting the negative impact not only on the finances of the city, but as well on our population. And as the mayor was saying, I know that this situation is not easy, but we are setting everything up that we can, absolutely everything, to limit the impacts and come out of it stronger after this crisis, and of course as quickly as possible. There you are, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Dorais, and I will now go to English, and then we will go to a question period.
So this afternoon, we are here to give you an overview of the city's public finances and to talk about some of the efforts that the city will have to make in order to get out of this crisis. We have to be realistic because it is clear that our government's public finances will be affected by the global economic downturn due to the pandemic. All major cities, Canadian, American cities, must review their priorities, and Montreal is no exception. So today, it is our duty to exercise fiscal responsibility, in order to avoid too large of a deficit. Today, we are announcing the first step we must take to ensure the healthy recovery of our economy. And Montreal, I have to say, is well positioned to face today's challenges. Our rigorous and responsible management over the past few years has allowed us to generate substantial surpluses and to have the strength and the ability to weather such a storm. Thanks to our rigorous management of the cities of Montreal's finances, we recorded a surplus of $251 million last year. Year after year, we have generated surpluses in order to be better prepared for time like this, as any responsible administration would do. However, the impacts of the city's revenues and expenditures are expected to be quite substantial, even in the most optimistic scenario. I will let my colleague, the President of the Executive Committee, tell you more details about our plan. But let us keep in mind that this is only a first step in the right direction to ensure that Montreal's finances remain healthy despite the current crisis. However, this will not be enough. Cities have less financial leeway than other levels of government, since municipalities rely heavily on property taxation. The solution to this crisis must not rest solely on the back of Montreal taxpayers. It will be imperative that Ottawa and Quebec helps us overcome the situation and position Montreal, Quebec, economic engine for a full and rapid recovery for the crisis. So we will be asking efforts to the different boroughs. We will be asking efforts to the different unions. This is the time for us to show that not only are we a responsible administration, we're still at the heart of the crisis right now, but we're also looking forward to make sure that our budgets and that our economic wealth is assured for the weeks and years to come. Monsieur Dorais?
Thank you, Mrs. Plante. So the situation we find ourselves in is not easy. But when compared to other major Canadian cities, we can count ourselves lucky, if I can say. However, the expenses directly related to the crisis, such as the purchase of sanitary equipment or overtime for frontline staff, add up to significant revenue losses. The expected slowdown in real estate transactions could significantly reduce our transfer tax revenues, as well as the various sources of revenue related to permits, parking fees, and many others. At this time, we anticipate a shortfall of $104.8 million to $294.1 million in the city's finances. However, we must keep in mind that these figures are estimates. They will certainly change in the coming month when the confinement will begin. Then we will have a better idea of the expected impact of this crisis on revenues and expenses. In addition to these amounts, there will be a shortfall on the public transit side, with a bill that is expected to be considerable on the ARTM side, ranging from $154 million to $244 million. All cities in the greater metropolitan region will have to deal with this crisis. We expect our government partners to actively help resolve this situation for the good of the entire Montreal region. From the very start, we have been clear. There is no question of us passing the bill to Montrealers. who have already been hard hit by the crisis. Our commitment not to tax citizens above inflation will be maintained. There is no question of digging deeper into their pockets to fill the hole for the current year, nor of reducing the services that will be offered to them. That is why today we are announcing the implementation of a budgetary recovery plan in order to limit spending and save $123.4 million this year. City Center Services will have to cut $85.7 million from their expenditures by 2020. The boroughs will have to cut 3.1% from their budgeted expenditures for a total savings of $23.7 million. Over the next few weeks, each department and each borough will have to present a complete plan to explain how they will achieve these savings. In the meantime, we will impose several control measures to curb spending, including a freeze in hiring, on professional fees, on purchases, and a freeze of $9 million in contingent expenditures planned by the administration. By acting now, quickly and diligently, we will ensure that we limit the negative impacts not only on the city's finances, but also on Montrealers. As the mayor said, this situation is not easy, but we are doing everything we can do, limit the impacts, and come out stronger from this crisis. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur Dorais. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Dorais. Thank you, Madam Mayor. First question. What big projects has the city decided to postpone or cancel?
Bonjour, merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Hello, thank you, Mr. Chapdelaine, for your question. As we speak, there is no specific project that we can announce today. What we are doing and have been doing for a few weeks, and it's going to continue even with more precision with the freeze of certain operations, is to have a look at what has been delayed because, there's a stop of construction, what will be delayed in time as well. So there are things that should have started or that were on the point of starting with a tight calendar. So that's what we're doing right now. We're analyzing all this. So when the time comes, we'll be able to announce it. But the first projects are really those who should have started already and who will be delayed in time. Are they still, can they be still done? Or will it go into the winter season? So these are the kinds of projects that will be eliminated or reviewed. So right now we have no announcement. We are doing the analysis on what cannot be done because of the confinement, and the progressive deconfinement will be the first ones, and then we'll be able to tie a number to it and announce it. Have you considered laying off staff? If so, in what sector? If not, why? Thank you, Madame Lévesque. So since the very beginning at the city, what we've wanted to do is to maintain our employees. We have maintained all of our employees and all of our assistants, so it is not in our plans right now to lay anybody off in any massive way. So all of the administrative units, all of the boroughs are going to be making a planning of the deconfinement, having to see the workers that they'll have and the assistance that will be necessary. There are people who necessarily were coming back for summer activities, and those activities, if they don't take place, we won't be calling those people back. So all of that would result in savings, so cuts, because we had budgeted it in full and the activities are going to be reduced. So we are not planning on any massive cuts, but assuredly, inexorably, there will be a difference between the budget and the reality in terms of employees and the return to jobs. The state of the situation hasn't been presented to the government of Quebec. Have discussions been started to get financial support? Yes. The discussions with Quebec concerning the weight, the very heavy weight that burdens the city of Montreal. Of course, we have been talking about it with the government of Quebec. We've been talking about it as well with the Canadian government. We are working on a startup plan or restart plan, and it was important for us as a first step to put a little bit of do a little bit of house cleaning. You know, as we say, we have to start by ordering things at home before we can ask. So we wanted to give the example saying that we're making considerable efforts to be able to find the amounts to be able to remain in the black, but we're not be able to get there in the long term without the help of both Quebec and Ottawa. So once again, it would not be acceptable, I believe, to just hand the bill to Montreal taxpayers. What will be the impacts of these compressions on the employees? What sacrifices are going to be asked of the unions? Thank you, Madame Corriveau, for your question. There is no sacrifice as such that is asked. What we are asking our people is to take all the measure and to see the amplitude of the situation and to contribute to the maintaining of services and the healthy management of the city, and therefore maintaining as many projects as possible. What we will be asking to all unions that already are aware of the situation, you know, we've been transparent in this administration, and we have been throughout with the unions as well. So the unions have been informed of the situation in which we find ourselves and in which we want to evolve. And the general director was mandated to have specific meetings with all unionized workers to see what the effort that would be asked of our people, because it is anybody who receives a check from the city, anybody who has, wages, is going to contribute and is going to ask to contribute. So that is what we are asking our employees and our staff, because I think that we have done it in a very progressist way since the beginning. The mayor and myself, the administration decided to maintain, to keep our people, to help as much as possible. And what we want is to continue working with them for an additional effort, of course. What is a proportion of income losses that could be considered as being delayed in time? Well, I don't really see any losses that can be delayed in time. Real losses are the expenses that are taken to face the crisis right now. So police officers, firefighters, a bunch of people that are doing overtime and that are working really very hard and delivering services of all kinds on the front lines. The expenses in material and equipment, all of these things are real expenses of real life, purchasing masks, Purell, gloves, different protective equipments. All of those are real expenses, and there's going to be more. So this is something that cannot be deferred. And in the same way, we can also not do so, and that is most of the shortfall of the city, is the income. Those can't be deferred in time. And people right now are buying homes or not. They're buying homes more slowly. The mutation rights, we're not going to be able to have them right away, or not as quickly as we had planned. For example, the construction industry. The government has said that construction will be done in the residential area for units that should have been delivered and have to be delivered by the 1st of July. So necessarily, it's just those permits that will come in and all those transfer rights associated to that, and not all the other ones that will be postponed. And those are important permits. So we are in a big part that our income that will not be there. And for the expenses, well, we have them right now for the crisis. Can you guarantee that the services to citizens will not be affected by the cuts? Well, of course, that is what we wish. Of course, when there is a question of the efforts of the boroughs, it will be, of course, up to the boroughs to present their scenario. But I believe that there is room to make decisions in order to affect citizen services as little as possible. I can give you the example of my own borough, Ville-Marie. We decided and succeeded, thanks to our very, very tight management, to have a buffer that is very useful to us right now. So we'll be able to compensate and make an effort in our borough thanks to that surplus. But of course, whether it be the main city or the boroughs, all the efforts will be given in that sense, and it will depend on each service. And that is what we're asking right now, is to, leave no stone unturned and to see what we can do as savings, but always having in mind that it affects citizens as little as possible. Whether they be projects that will be postponed, it could be that. Would it be, for example, not replacing positions that were going to end? That would also be another way of being able to have some savings. I could also add, I met all of the mayors of all the boroughs earlier on today. All of them, political parties, independents, etc. Everyone has agreed that this was a difficult exercise, but that had to be done. Everyone agreed that, in fact, we should not touch the services to citizens. And it will be a difficult exercise, Each situation in each borough is different. There's 19 boroughs, 19 different finances, 19 different populations and situations. But we all agreed that it was the effort to be made, that we had to do it in solidarity, and that we were going to review each of the activities. As the mayor was saying, to leave no stone unturned. Right now, the exercise that we had to do concretely in each borough is to think, okay, what had I planned for in my budget that I won't be doing, or that I will do differently, or that I did differently? What is the impact of that for each of those activities? And calculate the pluses, the minuses, and be able to give ourselves a little bit more leeway. That's the first part, and it will allow us to not affect the services to citizens. We'll also have projects. A part is paid for by the boroughs, and that can be a solution as well. The non-renewal of positions, because there are people where the activities might not be done because of the deconfinement, and that's another part. So our people are really going to be following. All the mayors, regardless of the parties, they all said that nobody's going to do partisan politics in this case. They just want to deliver the best services to citizens by comparing or respecting all the government guidelines and acting like responsible public decision makers. And that is what was discussed today with all the mayors of all the boroughs. One last question in French. Should we understand that these compressions correspond to the optimistic scenario of the shortage, which is 1.4 million? Well, if we want to make it simple, more or less, but we know that it will evolve very, very, very quickly. There are parts that are very hazy. The deconfinement is going to be done progressively in our scenario. In our scenario, it was being done now, the deconfinement, with an economic recovery that was going to be very quick. But we don't know what the recovery is going to look like, and that is why we're working on another recovery plan with the different levels of government. But for the time being, it looks like, let's say, in the first third of the optimistic scenario, but there's still a lot of unknowns. The crisis is far from over, and we also don't know how the different levels of government are going to be looking at the situation with all of the Quebec municipalities and Canadian. Thank you. I just want to add one last thing. When we look at the optimistic scenario or the most pessimistic, I think that for the population, in an optimistic scenario, it would be a quick deconfinement and a quick recovery. And then the pessimistic scenario would be a deconfinement that is going to be slower, as well as a recovery that will be slower. And right now, we don't have a crystal ball. There's a lot of elements that we don't know anything about, and we're going to have to adapt ourselves to the situation. English questions.
There are now more than 10,000 cases of COVID-19 on the island of Montreal, and more than 700 people have died. Did you think Montreal would be this hard hit by the coronavirus outbreak?
Well, I think no one could imagine that we would be facing such a crisis, and that everything would be all activities will be stopped. At the same time, Montreal, like other big cities in the world, even in Canada, the fact that there's a lot of people, so a big density. I mean, we see that in all those big cities because of those reasons. There's more cases of coronavirus. So there's definitely like a connection between the two. That being said, behind the numbers, I think I'm always thinking about the fact that those numbers are actually real people that have died, people that are now in hospital, and of course, all my thoughts are with the family and friends of those who have lost someone since now.
Merci tout le monde, ça complète la période de questions.
This completes the question period. Thank you, everyone.
Monsieur Dorais.
Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Merci à vous aussi.